at Children's Health and a friend of UT Arlington. Angela Cauthorn, Workforce Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager at DFW Airport and a UTA alum. And Nichole Sheridan, HR Business Partner at Lockheed Martin and also a UTA alum. And Kim, Angela, and Nichole are also diversity partners. I thank you for sharing your valuable time and insights with us. Naomi Samuel, a doctoral student and member of the DREI Council, DREI Scholars Group at UTA, and will moderate and manage the session. So let's get started. Naomi?
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Bell. Hi, everyone. We're so excited to have each of you here, particularly our panelists. So, yes, I'm Naomi and I use she, her pronouns. And so, as we get started here, I will throw this first question to you, Kim, and then to Angela, and then to Nichole, just to make things a bit easier. And we are just going to jump right in. I have my notepad here, and I'm excited to just take notes and get all of your perspectives. So, this first question is, why do you believe diversity is important in the hiring process?
You're muted.
I knew that was going to happen. So first and foremost, thank you all for inviting me to this session. I truly appreciate it. So the first question, so why do I believe diversity is important in the hiring process? So I see the hiring process as one of the most important parts of the company's value proposition and essentially the marketing plan for the company. So it's kind of like the calling card for an organization. It's like if you are starting a Kickstart fund, getting the funding to start a business, it kickstarts the selling process. So this is where you're looking for buyers. I believe that diversity brings creativity, and you cannot be successful in building a brand without the creative skills of these diverse perspectives. So the who, what, and why in your campaign, in your value proposition needs to catch the attention of all walks of life. So how you build that connection through the written word, the graphics, the pictures, the videos, everything that you do to kind of highlight your organization is part of that hiring process. It defines who you are. So I would say the why it's important is it because it defines who you are as a company and who's interested in joining the organization. So it's important that your diverse talent that you look at and that you describe the process to your applicants and your candidates. But it's also important to your current employees. Having a well thought out hiring process that's transparent to everyone that touches the organization is going to be a complexity that you're going to have to solve. You learn a lot about an individual going through the initial stages of a recruitment process. You kind of sort of see their best foot forward, but when you integrate all components to who touches your process, it's going to be important, and it does help you define who your company is. The second thing and why diversity is important is because it means flexing your style to communicate to a wide body of people. So, for example, you wouldn't talk to a 3-year-old like you would talk to a 25-year-old or a 45-year-old. I call it check your flex. So what you're trying to communicate that many will understand. So I emphasize many because all is aspirational. So we all know, regardless of the best campaigns out there, you'll never get to all understanding what your company does if you're not transparent in that way. And again, going back to the creativity and diversity, if you want a well-oiled machine with really high-performing members, you have to define that process. And then the next two things is it's about diversifying your portfolio. I started with the Kickstarter fund as an example. When I say this is what you do, when I say diversify your portfolio, what do you guys think of initially? What comes to mind for you? You can type this in the message column too, so I know that you're still there. But instantly you think of money, you think of 401k, you think of an investment. Well, guess what? The top 2 spend for an organization is your employee. And so diversifying your portfolio means you're proactively taking a position that talent brought into your or matters to your organization. So you're essentially putting your money where your mouth is, right? So you're investing in the number one resource, which is your employees. Your brand is not successful without the diversified employee portfolio that you create. And finally, and a bonus for all of you, is diversity is important in the hiring process, not only for the newbies that are coming into the organization or the future generation of leaders, it's important to your current employees. If you want to build an environment where people stay with your organization, grow and develop, you're losing out if you're not really developing your current employees along the way. So I would say those factors, and I can go on and on about this, but those are the factors I consider important and why diversity is matters in the hiring process.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yes. And so we will go ahead and go to Angela and keep this knowledge coming.
Okay, so I don't want to repeat or double down on anything that Kim said, because I agree with all of it. But I would also like to point out
listening to a meeting.
Another reason why diversity is important in the hiring.
If anyone is unmuted, we can hear you speaking, so let's keep it muted. All right.
The reason why diversity is important in the hiring process is just as important as it is on bringing in diverse talent, as it's important to embed it into the internal process. So it's important to have interviewing panels. It's important to have people look at your questions, make sure that you're following a consistent process. So we like to have interview panels for almost all of our positions as part of the process, but we also look for diversity in that panel. It's not just, oh, who can we get that randomly might be. It's ensuring that we have a cross section of our workforce looking at that candidate so that you don't have bias inserted into the process, so that you're trying to do your best job at creating that candidate experience that reflects what the employee experience is going to be, as well as bringing in that diverse talent. Does that help? Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Angela. And Nichole, do you want to wrap us up with this question?
Yeah, I will actually tag on to what Angela said. Just, including HR specifically in the interview panel, because I don't know about y'all, but I support, 500 employees, and I have no idea what an engineer does. So if they weren't technically qualified, they wouldn't have, got the opportunity to interview. So from the HR standpoint, we're there to check those implicit biases. The leaders may have, background knowledge to what, happened in whatever scenario, but as HR, we're really there to say, okay, I see that, but are you, pulling something that wasn't, included in the interview? So as HR, we're really there to check our biases. And just the other thing that both of them touched on was, keeping your workforce as, diverse as your environment, which I know a lot of us are like, okay, we've heard that before. But think about, just how many people, and I know if you're at UTA, you've definitely heard this quote, bring your whole self to work. So for me, I heard it specifically stated, it was like a kindergarten or elementary teacher. Someone asked him why he always says grown-ups as opposed to parents. And so he's like, well, not everyone lives with their parents at the same time. So, think about it if you're there, in class and your teacher always says, hey, ask your parents this, ask your parents that. Well, what if you would live with grandma and grandpa? So think about the entire year you just felt excluded because your teacher always referenced parents as opposed to grown-ups or guardians or something like that. So just think about how many employees feel left out because, we're not trying to be inclusive by saying, partners as opposed to what if we only just say husband and wife and everything, the stereotypical things that are always said. So just the importance of bringing your whole self to work. And some people take that for granted because they look like, the stereotypical American dream person. And not everyone, has those things away from work. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you each for those thoughtful comments. And I just want to call out Nichole's awesome shirt on top of these awesome comments. So this next question is going to be a bit more specific. So could you each share an example of how you've deliberately included diversity in your hiring process? And so whoever would like to chime in, please feel free to do so.
I'll go. So back previous company, not with the airport, but my previous company, part of the reason why they hired me actually was to help to create a disability recruiting partnership. And so looking for, community partners, we partnered with the Department of Assistive and Rehabilitative Services, as well as their Division of Blind Services, the Goodwill Center, the Goodrich Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, the City of Fort Worth, Easter Seals. We got a whole bunch of community partners that were very active in that place that would be able to help us advise us both from an internal as well as an external perspective. So they were feeding us candidates, and we were trying to make sure that not only are we trying to recruit people with disabilities, that we're also creating a welcome environment for them once they get on site. And that, what I would say, was probably one of the biggest intentional, like targeting a specific group. We had all of the nonprofit leaders come to the headquarters. We gave a big tour. We went through the whole thing. So they're also building relationships with each other. It was a really good synergy.
I would say what I deliberately do for diversity and inclusion, and lots of leaders in this organization do this as well, but we all know diversity and inclusion isn't just a day job, right? This is something that's ingrained in everything that we do. So I do spend quite a bit of time participating in grassroots organizations that are pivotal to the success of minority representation. So giving a voice to those that otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to leverage their voice. So many of the organizations like the National Association of Asian Professionals, the Multicultural Alliance, Girls Inc., Orchid Giving Circle. I mean, there are things that, I do deliberately to attend and share skills and resources with those organizations. I also put my money where my mouth is. So I do represent and sponsor scholarships for undervoiced populations. I also do a lot of advocacy around supporting women-owned businesses like Libby Spears with Bravo, QC Stone through the Source of Hope, and Mary Leone, who works with veterans and people with disabilities through her outreach partners. So, when you think about the investments you make in your organization, they pay you. But it's what you do outside of that when they're not watching or paying you that really makes a difference. Because with all of these engagements, I'm able to build a bridge to open positions, build a bridge to training opportunities for folks that otherwise wouldn't have internship opportunities or networking or mentoring. And then I also help professional leaders. So because of all of this outreach, I know that there are many of us who want to join boards or nonprofit boards, but don't feel like you have the experience to do it. Well, there's a ton of boards that are looking for passionate, driven individuals who are not afraid of diversity. So Nichole, I love your shirt. I mean, they want to be all in. And so if you're interested in looking at board service, if you're looking at learning about other nonprofit organizations, this is where the investments lie. And what you do outside of the organization and how you represent in the organization, it matters in the hiring process. So if you are a good brand for your company, people will follow you and want to work in your organization.
I actually don't work specifically in recruiting as an HR business partner, so I don't have a lot of the, bottom-up decision-making, criteria or decision-making. But what I do work directly with is the leaders that we hire. So in L-coded positions or something, I'm part of the interview panels. So one thing that we try to do is just ensure that we have a diverse candidate pool, and then again, just kind of checking the biases that our leaders who are interviewing those potential leaders or candidates are having. So I just ditto everything Angela and Ken said.
Awesome. Yes, bias checking is so important, and really appreciating this about the community and really involving the community in what happens in the workplace. So for our next question, are you or is your organization actively and regularly engaged in conversation and programs related to D&I? And can you share an example and the process really involved in establishing and delivering that kind of a program?
So I'll volunteer to go first because I'm super excited about this baby that's almost full grown. So last year, my director, so I support engineering and technology, and our HR director really wanted to pull from an experience that she had in her previous role for RMS, Lockheed, and I support aeronautics. So she was really wanting a diversity mentoring aspect or initiative / pilot to go on within engineering and technology. So we kind of worked together, and I actually utilized our historical FAP, which is Functional Affirmative Action Program goals that we had not met previously in the previous year. So I took all of our attrition data and which job codes and titles and levels, were leaving the company. And then I identified 30 key high performing individuals who were, female and or people of color. And I paired them based on survey. There was a lot of background that happened on this. And it was just to see it come to fruition, can't say that word. It's really been super inspiring. We paired them with 9 ELT members, and so they each have a specific ELT member within engineering and technology that they have a one-on-one with. We send out monthly tips. We now have mentee showcases. So twice a month, we have one of the mentees. They can give us a business case that they worked on and they helped solve. And they get exposure to the entire ELT board. So that's directors, that's VPs, and they can see all that. And I mentioned earlier that as HR, we don't really know what our talent does. We know they're awesome, but we just don't know firsthand what they do. So we get a little bit of their background, personal, experience, but then we also get hey, this one individual worked this problem from beginning to end. And so just seeing the exposure that these females and or people of color have had, and then what they specifically did for our business has been super beneficial in just getting to know the work and the awesome talent that we have. But just the pilot itself, we're on our 7th month mark, and we just did a check-in survey, and so far we've gotten a lot of good feedback. So that's a specific program that we worked from the ground up. And then I'll stop talking and let Angela and Kim.
Can I just say, Nichole, you inspire me. I mean, just your passion and your you light up a room. I mean, this just is so exciting for me. I know Angela has goosebumps as well. It's just amazing the pride you take in it. It's exhausting, isn't it? But oh my gosh, I have goosebumps right now just listening to this because of all the hard work that really go into it. And oh my gosh, I appreciate you. I do. That's amazing. Amazing work.
And Nichole, I come from Lockheed World, so will you help them know what an ELT is?
I'm sorry, executive leadership team. So all of our vice presidents or directors who support directors. So each mentee who's a level 4 or 5 gets exposure to the guy who runs everything. So it's just super beneficial just to put extra light on those mentees who, we're trying to bridge the gap and get them more exposure to leadership and get them in leadership roles as opposed to just being, just an individual contributor.
That's awesome.
So amazing.
Like I said, it was a little baby, but it just grew so quickly. It's a teenager now.
Yes. The pride is palatable. And so Kim, Angela, do either of you want to spotlight something that you've been a part of in terms of a D&I program?
Do you want to go, Kim?
Highlight that I've been in diversity and inclusion for years. And when I joined Children's here over the last 7 months or so, diversity has really meant something different to me. When we think about the impact of healthcare and the unequalness, I guess, of what that looks like and the disparity there, it has really opened my eyes to service. And I think we sometimes take that for granted. I have really great insurance, so I never really think about the impacts. But when you see it walk through the hospital every day and you see people being denied, or you see us trying to work around the clocks to service folks, diversity in that way makes a huge difference. So what I would add to Nichole is that passion and that drive that she has to start a program make it successful, I imagine she had some naysayers, but she used her voice to get that support. And I feel like all of us as diversity champions really need to speak up on things that matter, that things that maybe we don't think we have, the expertise in, but we have the passion to drive. So I would say at Children's, we do a lot of that. While diversity from an employee perspective is so valuable, it's the diverse perspectives of our children that really matter too.
And what I would like to say from the airport's perspective is we have a lot of buy-in at both the CEO, the executive ranks, at the leadership perspective, and we have it at the employee perspective. You kind of lose it a little bit, I think, sometimes in the middle. And one of the things that we've been trying to do is we've been systematically thinking through diversity and inclusion, and we decided that equity is that bridge. So last year we went through the process of, instead of just diversity and inclusion, we are now diversity, equity, and inclusion, because a barrier, you can bring in diverse people, but inclusion's where all of the benefits to your business are, the benefits to the employees are. If people don't like each other and fight and don't get along, and you're not actively trying to create an inclusive workspace, then you're losing all of the benefits. You're just going to have to keep recruiting diverse people because they're going to walk out the door. So one of the things that we've been doing is looking at our equity and making sure that all of our processes and our policies and our behaviors and our leadership behaviors are inclusive, and that we're working to make sure that there's equity, that it is as fair as possible, and that everyone has the same access and opportunities. And in that process, we also realize that there's a gap between where our behaviors that we want people to have and where they think they are and what people are actually feeling. So when you ask people and women and people of color, do they feel like they have allies at work? They're reporting that they're feeling that they have allies a lot less than people are reporting that they are allies. And we think that there's a gap there in a knowledge. It's not a want to, it's the know how to problem. So what we've started doing this year is we're releasing an allyship guide in which all of our ERGs contributed content. So you have the generalized, here's how it feeds into our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, but also here's how to do it. And then we're having an allyship workshop this year, which all of the employees are required to take, and it is attached to our management incentive program. So at the end of the year, everyone that's a grade 5 or above is going to want to make sure that everyone took that training, because that's how they're going to be paid on their incentives. And then the last thing is we're opening up our ERGs, and we're doing a big ERG push, because we've been able to show over years the impact. Our ERGs have anywhere from 3 to 5 times less turnover as the normal, the normal employee population. Ours have ranged from 3 to 6%, when the airports at the same time has been between 9 and 12%. And we can show that they're more engaged. So we're showing all of these big, hey, here are all of the benefits to being in an ERG, but we have less than a quarter of the population that have been part of it. So in trying to cultivate that inclusive culture and trying to ensure that we have allies, we're trying to equip our workforce with that, and recognizing that that's what we're going to need to have that inclusive. So when you think about it, for a lot of years, we've been focused on the representation. We're really trying to focus on how that feels to feel like you belong.
So for those who aren't aware, ERG or BRG is Employee Resource Group or Business Resource Group. We love
Thank
acronyms
you, Nichole.
in HR. No problem.
Yes, thank you, Nichole. We definitely want to be inclusive, as we discussed with business jargon. So thank you each for that. Those are some awesome, meaningful programs, perspectives, and that's awesome. And so we're going to keep moving forward. So another question, kind of back to hiring. When you set out to hire candidates whose beliefs really align with your diversity-related mission, how do you go about assessing that? And how do you avoid disqualifying people with different identities?
thought this one was a trick question. I actually had to think about it for a minute because, you know, it isn't really about a belief as much as it is about what they believe, right? I mean, we've all been in interviews where we had to bring our whole selves in order to uniquely describe who we are and what we bring to the table. And a lot of that onus is on the person, like the candidate, right? The applicant. But I think that, you know, like at Children specifically, our mission is to make life better for children. And that is very clear everywhere we touch the community and our internal populations. So regardless of the position they're interviewing for, they have to believe they can contribute in that way. That they have this superpower. Like you get that question a lot, right? What superpower would you like? And you often have to, you know, get them to describe that. And I say this was a trick question because I hate saying disqualifying people because we don't necessarily disqualify them. And from an HR perspective, I'll put that hat back on and say, you know, when we decline people, we actually, and really good recruiters do this, they'll say, you know, not now, but maybe soon, or not now, this organization's hiring. I mean, there's things that we do to help them kind of get to where they need to get to. But how they describe, you know, what they want and how they bring that to the table is, we as an organization have to be open to that, right? It's not so much they're trying to fit in with us, we're trying to fit in with them. So I think it's the organization has to really, you know, check themselves too. Because if we close the door to unique perspectives, we are not going to be successful. I mean, if you think about the future generations that are coming aboard, you know, they don't really care about all the perks. They want to know that they're going to be valued. And so they're interviewing us. And I think that gets lost in translation sometimes. So, you know, we have a lot of technical stuff. Like we're implementing a new human resource information tool, which will, you know, look at biases. There's certain terms or the techie stuff behind it. I'm not a STEM person specifically. Nichole could probably talk to this, but there's the biases around language that we use, how we describe the role and the positions. You know, we don't focus on names per se because sometimes that you know, uncovers a bias that someone might have. You know, we don't ask about, you know, specifics that would, you know, implicitly come out with a bias. I mean, we consciously want to be unbiased, and our systems and tools that we invest our money in, you know, have to answer these questions. So as we look at vendors that are providing and helping us in this diversity space, we're asking them the tough questions too. Because it's not about just implement the system and you'll be fine, you'll be a diversity champion. It's really, do you understand what you want as an organization, and not so much what they believe, what their belief is, but what they believe in. And we just want them to believe in the organization. Sorry to take it philosophical there.
Oh, no, we love to get philosophical in this space. So do we have more thoughts around candidates and aligning with the belief or what they believe?
Well, I took a little bit of a different take on it because I was thinking of it from the set of, we do, like I mentioned earlier, we do have the panel interviews, and we had that in our previous employer as well. And we utilize set questions to where that we're ensuring there's some consistency and you don't have one, you know, candidate getting asked one question and another candidate getting asked another question. And we have diversity and inclusion questions embedded into the bank. So we want to make sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion are part of their, I would say it's got a little bit of a value system, that when they come here, that we are going to hold them to a certain set of behavior. Now, they don't have to believe it, to Kim's point. They're entitled to believe any way they want to, but we are expecting them to behave inclusively when they're at work. And typically the way that we do that before we bring you in, you do have a probationary period, but we want to ask, what are your thoughts on that? And you can kind of figure that out in an interview if this is the first time they've ever thought about it. And that's part of the STAR method and everything else. I do think that from a certain perspective, we are trying to bring in people that hold our values and beliefs. But I wouldn't say, to Kim's point, that we're disqualifying them if they don't. But I would say it would make them be less of a candidate if they're matched on everything, but this person had a really bad answer for that diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. And for the STAR method, again, business jargon. So that's the interview behavioral technique, right? So we have our situation, the task at hand, the action you took, and the result. And so that's very common in these interviews, right? So that's very exciting to hear about the D&I questions being embedded in that process and such forth. And Nichole, do you have anything to add to what's been said?
I will just say, so to that STAR method, this is just a little tip for any of you who may interview and utilize this question and get a GD&I question. For some reason, HR always gets, we typically do a roundtable with the questions, and I'm always the one asking the inclusive question. And I think from the candidate perspective, they hear HR talking about inclusion, and so it just immediately throws them off. I don't know why, but I would say, just have a story or an example in your back pocket. You're going to get asked a question about this. Have a scenario in your back pocket that you've gone through, because when you hear, oh, well, I worked with a customer from a different country, and I just tried to understand what he was saying. That's being a good person. You're like, that's not going the extra mile. You're understanding and you're being patient, to understand what he's saying or what that person is saying. So I would just say, just have a good story in your back pocket. You're going to be asked.
And I would like to double down on that. I would agree with that. And if you don't have a good story, if your example is actually a negative on how you handle something, a way of turning around the STAR format is, we call it the STAR RR. So what's the alternative action that you would have taken with the alternative result? Like, now that you've made this mistake, this is what I would have done now. So sometimes it doesn't always have to be positive as long as you've learned from it. So the alternative action.
Looking back, what I learned was XYZ.
Yep.
That is awesome. That is an awesome little shift right there. And so we're going to have one last question before we open up for Q&A. So just in a sentence or two, can you share what you consider to be the most important HR strategy for D&I at your organization?
I'll go. I would say it's alignment. And I would say that's for almost any HR strategy. It's alignment to the company's overall strategy. So when I report out our accomplishments, I say how it touches to our strategic plan. We had lower turnover here, and this saved us X amount of dollars. And that matters because, well, we're in a global pandemic and people aren't flying. So how aligning to how your program supports the overall business, whatever that may be, is, I think, critical, because a lot of times people think, oh, well, it's the nice fluffy, it's the food, fun, and flags. And you really want people to see that diversity, equity, and inclusion has a big impact on the business.
And I'm going to start with a movie or a music title. So I'm going to age myself here. So Huey Lewis has a song called The Power of Love. So I'm going to use that acronym because I think HR strategy is how you accomplish that strategic goal. And it's listening, operations, value, and evolving. But I'll focus more on operations. You can create a diversity and inclusion plan, and it can be so well oiled and wonderful and touch every single aspect of every walk of life. But if you don't understand what you do as a business, how you sell, how you make your money, where the analytics are, how you measure goals, how to read a P&L, how to look at budgets, no level of diversity and inclusion is going to help in all of that. So really great HR strategies include the learning perspective, how adults learn, how interns learn, how newbies learn. I mean, you really have to go back to the basics in order to take several steps forward. And I love UT Arlington, and I'm just going to do a plug for you guys because you do a fantastic job educating what's real. Like, you give a realistic job preview to what's going to happen in the real world. And I think a lot of times HR strategy, it kind of loses that, right? We think, oh, they'll get that through another operations leader. But HR folks, the HR strategy has to include the love that I talked about, but specifically operations. I mean, they have to talk about how we make the money in order to drive where diversity and inclusion really matters. Because if you really take a step back and look at your organization, we know where the diverse people are. I mean, I'll be frank, in previous organizations, that was in IT or technology services. And that's only because we had contracts with folks that were overseas in Asia. So we really need to understand more about when we say the value of diversity matters. This is where I think HR strategy can really step up.
I think to that point, just kind of combining what Kim and Angela were saying, you can look at it top down or bottom up, but, so say you're assigned a project, I, Nichole, am assigned a project. How does my project, align with our HR initiatives? How do our HR initiatives align with our GD&I initiatives? How does both of those, goals or success stories align with our business goals and our key milestones and everything like that? So just knowing how I think a value add would be knowing how you specifically can impact your business. And so, it's just encompassing all of that together.
Awesome. Thank you each for that. And so, okay, so just for the audience, definitely feel free to add something in the chat or raise your hand, and I'm happy to call on you. And we had a question earlier posed. So the question was, how can I bring or show my diversity in an interview? And we were talking about interviews earlier, so feel free to chime in, anyone.
So I think there's two factors that are important in an interview where you own it as a candidate, and that's at the beginning and the end. And I often say the first question that anybody ever asks is, why are you here? Why are you interested? Why are you confident for this job? Why should we hire you? And if you don't have a really good story to tell about you in a very succinct but humorous but diverse perspective, start practicing now. I mean, that elevator speech is going to get you very far in life, because that is going to be your calling card for any icebreaker that you'll ever need. And then also during the interview, you may screw up an answer somewhere in the middle of the conversation. And if you want to make good on that, the last question is, do you have any questions for us? Anything you want to share? Again, that's your way of saying, listen, let me tell you a little story about me, and I think that that's what hiring managers want. They want someone to bring a different perspective, not just a typical, I'm just going to answer your questions and that's all I'm going to give you. Make it entertaining. Bring your authentic self in. If you're funny, bring the humor. If you have, a perspective from a race, a racial ethnicity, bring that to the table. If you have a unique perspective where you studied abroad, or if you have a diverse multiracial family, bring that in. A book that you read, a book that you heard about, a podcast. So there's a variety of ways you can bring that to the table. But I would say, in the interview specifically, it's the beginning and the end, and it's your story that you tell.
Awesome. Did anyone have anything to add to that? I know I'm taking notes over here.
I can't come up with anything that was better than what she said that would add value.
So I just have a unique story-ish. So I am a wheelchair user, and language does matter. So I believe Kim was, or it may have been Dr. Bell who was mentioning something, language does matter. So when I love educating leaders. And so some of them will always say, they're confined to a wheelchair or something like that. And so I'm like, hey, when you think of confined to a wheelchair, you get a negative connotation. Like it seems like, oh, that person's stuck in a wheelchair. Whereas I'm like, hey, there is, we're a wheelchair user. So that's fine. But a funny thing, when I did start supporting a new director, we were coordinating staff meetings in conference rooms. He's like, typically we'll have our staff meetings in my office. There's not a lot of room, but we can pull up another chair. I didn't say this until I got to know him later, and I was going to say, oh, well, I bring my own chair. You don't have to pull up one for me. So it's, thinking through things like that. So now all my directors and all my HR team will say something. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to roll out of here. And they're just like, they roll their eyes and they're like, okay, Nichole, it's fine. So it's to your point, Kim, owning that from the very beginning. Like, I was hired on, I just did a phone interview, but had I been in the, room with my interview panel, they could obviously very well see that I would be in a wheelchair, but I probably would have made them know that I know that they know that I'm in a wheelchair. So yeah, definitely owning your differences is definitely a plus.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Nichole. And we have another question here. Thank you, Ife. Ife asks, when you create diversity programs like what Nichole described earlier, how do you handle the what about me crowd, those who do not get included in the initiative from their perspective, right, and are upset about that?
Well, I guess it would depend on how they bring forth that concern because I often, and the way that I read that question, I used to be chief diversity officer, and I remember people felt like they had a complaint about an ERG or an employee resource group that we created or some sort of program. They would call the company hotline and complain in that way. Like, hey, I don't resonate with any of these programs. What about me? Why can't I have, a group, et cetera? And I think that the second part of that is, the what about me crowd. I mean, if you're doing a diversity engagement or program well, you have created a foundation that allows for an open environment. Like, people will ask, will say something. And I think that that's where that's going to be important. I mean, most people that want to be part of a diversity initiative are going to speak up, or they're going to find a champion or an advocate to do so. But if you are the leader and you're trying to create a resource group or a program, I think it's going to be important to lend your ear to everybody, like really read the room to those people that, feel like it's not about me, or what about me, what's in it for them. But it's always about that. You always have to look at the other factors that come into play there. You're not going to make everybody happy. Just because you have a diversity initiative does not mean you're going to make everybody happy. You're going to forget somebody. Somebody's going to feel left out, for sure.
So I think to that point, Kim, I think one of the biggest, value adds and the biggest way of guiding initiatives like this would be the leadership buy-in, definitely how the leadership, communicates and the communications that go out. Again, language matters, how these things are framed. So definitely that leadership, vice president buy-in, because ultimately, they're going to own it, and you have to communicate that just exactly how they communicated that. So what we were really careful about is just how the program was communicated. So we didn't say, hey, only for, people of color and females. We're like, hey, look at these high potential females and people of color that we already have in our leadership pipeline. We want to amplify them more. So we were referring to, Angela was saying earlier, there's that top, the top people who really want to be, inclusive. And then you have the, frontline employees. Hey, I want to be inclusive as well, but it kind of gets stuck in the middle. And, I refer to that, a lot of HR individuals refer to that as the frozen middle. So, we want those people, we're trying to unclog that pipe, if that makes sense. So I think it just really revolves around the communication around the project or initiative that you're doing.
And I would agree with everything they just said, and also say that I think anytime you roll out something that there's going to be a resistance on, is that you have a resistance strategy, that you have that resistor. How are we going to handle it? Around diversity, equity, and inclusion, a lot of times it's your white men, not to pick on them. There's, a lot of great programs, white men as full diversity partners. There's a lot of work in that space, but a lot of times they are the ones that say, well, when are we going to have a white engineer of the year, awards or whatever. And so it's understanding who is going to be the one that says what's in it for me, and you have a strategy to address it.
Thank you for that. And we have another question. Tal, thank you for submitting. The question is, what are some tips for career management straight out of college? So I assume your first role that you each have.
So can I take it first, since this is my first role straight out of college? So I graduated with my master's in human resource management in December of 2019. I actually started as an intern with Lockheed in May of 2019, and then I transitioned full-time January 2020. So it was almost, pre-pandemic. We hadn't hit the pandemic yet. So I would definitely say, career management-wise, ask questions, know what you're getting into with your job, but just specifically tips on how to get a job straight out of college. Your professors are literally your key to success. Network, network, network. I can't tell you how many times, like, I'm the type of person who feels bad reaching out just for anything. Yet I have people reaching out to me, who I haven't talked to in 10 years, like, hey, can you do me a solid? Like, reach out, network, don't feel bad. Karma exists. Like, network with your professors. That's literally how I got my job. I would not be here if I didn't, utilize my professors at UTA. So just network. I know it seems, I'm on this panel right now with, Kim and Angela, and they're like professionals, like they've been in their career, but like for me, I just I feel inadequate that Dr. Bell even asked me to, do this, but I love diversity and inclusion, and you just right person at the right time doing the right job. You just got to utilize your connections. That's literally how anyone ever gets a job.
I would like to comment on that. So prior to 2 roles ago, I was over our intern program, and I would say that our company was on a loan. The goal is to convert your interns into full-time employees. And so the sooner in your college process that you can start and get an internship, whether it be, right after your freshman year, the better, because that gives you more opportunities either to intern with the same company and to really decide whether or not that's where you want to go, or to intern at different companies. But those companies, as long as you do good, are going to want to hire you. They have conversion metrics associated to it. So the biggest tip I would say, if you're trying to get a job out after college, is to get a job in college. It's really to utilize those internships. And then I would also, beyond just your college professors, is to network. So if you're in HR and you want a job in HR, join a SHRM organization. Get involved with your trade. If you're, in accounting, join a group that's associated with that's a professional group. That way you can be making contacts and networking, and say, hey, is there anything that you can work that I can help you with while I'm learning, so that you're getting value to be able to provide to them.
And the only thing I'll add is, Nichole, I'm learning from you, my friend. I'm learning from you. We are all in this together. I would say also underused resources. You guys pay a tuition at some point, I'm sure, to UT Arlington. There is an amazing career center. Like, you have resources I didn't have 20-something years ago. And if you're not leveraging that, if you're not, knocking on the door of your HR department at UTA or the diversity program with Dr. Bell, and volunteering your time in that, you're wasting really good, valuable resources. And then the second thing that I'll say is apply for positions that stretch you. I have found that a lot of new hires won't apply for positions because they don't feel like they qualify. Believe it or not, you may. So I would absolutely just apply for everything and anything and give it a try. Just be prepared, though, when you get to that interview, because a lot of times when companies are interviewing folks, it's the person that they're looking for, that additional flavor, not necessarily all their technical skills. I think Southwest says it, and American also says it, that they can teach the technical skills. They can't teach the personal side. So, take a bet on yourself and apply for these positions. I think that's what's going to be important just from the get-go.
To Angela's point of applying to internships, just always also remember that a lot of companies are like a full academic year ahead. So right now they're planning for like next year interns. So just always keep looking for internship opportunities. Like, they're added daily, but just remember that they're like a whole year ahead of you. So just keep that in mind when you are applying. And even if you're wanting a career in HR, like, I think of it as, and this may be wrong, but I feel like all careers can basically sometimes head to HR. Again, to Kim's point, we're hiring the people side. You can teach skills and everything. You can't teach that ability aspect.
That is awesome advice. And so we might have time for this one last question. So speaking of careers in HR, Sheila asks, I teach undergraduate HR. What would you like the entry-level HR professionals to know or demonstrate knowing about coming in and understanding how to implement a diversity strategy?
I would like to say that it's not all food, fun, and flags. So I don't know what it is from a college student perspective, but I know that I'm constantly having to tell people that what we do is work. Because some of the stuff that they see is, oh, well, there's, an awareness event for Black History Month and there's food. And so they see all of the fun and miss that that's meant to be a draw to have you come in and listen to someone, that it's meant to be educational. And so there's a lot of strategy and forethought that goes into what do we need our workforce to look like and where are those gaps. There's a lot that goes into diversity, equity, and inclusion that's on the HR technical skills and not just all the, oh, well, we're party planners. And so if you're good at that, so I guess from teaching the next group coming in, it's really and how to lay out a project plan, how to, align to strategies. A lot of that's what I would really like anyways. If that's helpful.
Building these diversity programs and being part of employee resource groups really is about creating a small business, like I've said earlier. I think what I would tell undergrad HR folks is to join a nonprofit organization and just pick a role and be good at that, or to learn more about it. Because if you're successful in a nonprofit grassroots effort, it's like you have a job. And that's where you really get an understanding of what diversity means. And you get to, make mistakes in a very safe environment, right? So that's where I feel like when we hired undergrad HR folks, is that they didn't have like the street smarts. They brought the book smarts and all of that, but they didn't really have the savviness of the street smarts. And so I would definitely look at undergrad as volunteering your time to practice your trade. And joining a nonprofit is a perfect opportunity to do that.
Okay, I know we're coming at 12:55, so I'm looking at Dr. Bell asking if we have time for one more question or if we want to go ahead and wrap up. I feel like we need to wrap up.
Okay, that's fine. We can wrap up. I want to thank everyone for coming, all of the attendees, and I saw we had a nice big crowd. I hope that you were enlightened and inspired to go out and change the world, and I hope that you will be brave enough to even try. I know I'm inspired. I was taking notes just like Naomi, and encouraged, because this is really hard work. And it's just encouraging to see so many folks engaged and coming, and to have heard from our awesome speakers. So special thanks to Nichole, Kim, and Angela for being diversity partners and for coming today to kick off Business Week. The theme is diversity, racial equity, and inclusion. And I can't think of a better panel to start this week off with. Thank you, Naomi, for being such a great moderator. And thank you to all of you who asked questions. And if there's some questions that were not answered that you really want some insights on, please feel free to email and we'll try to get back with you with some information on that. So thanks everyone, and have a great week. And I hope that you'll participate in some more of the Business Week activities this week.
And thank you, Dr. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.